Who in here has somebody that they trust? Raise your hand if you have at least one person in this world that you trust.
Does the dog count?
Dogs count. Dogs count. Right on. Okay, awesome. It's a blessing to have people we trust. Who in here has 2 people that they trust? Raise your hand. Who in here has 3 people? 5 people? 10 people? Okay, some of you guys only raise your hand for 1 and 2. So we just established that everyone in this room does not trust most people. That said, I have another question for you guys. If we just established that everyone in this room does not trust most people and most groups of people, then why do we trust healthcare providers to custody our health records? Why do we trust Facebook to record our personal data when we like to use the internet, when we want to talk to a friend, when we upload a photo of our wife in her bikini on vacation? Why do we trust Facebook with that data? Why do we trust the bank to custody our monetary energy? Why do we trust government agencies to count votes, to allocate budgets appropriately without corruption? Why do we trust Ticketmaster to keep record that we purchased admission to an event? Why do we trust stockbrokers and brokerage firms to custody our financial assets? And we trust that they keep record that we own those very assets that we are giving them the money to buy. We trust that they keep record that we own those. Why do we trust the clerk of courts to keep record that we own a property, that we own a building? If we just established that everyone in this room does not trust most people, and inherently most groups of people, why do we trust all of these third parties, intermediaries, with all of our private information, our data, our financial resources, our assets? Why do we trust them with that? There's got to be a better way. And that better way is with blockchain. Blockchain is the better way. With blockchain, we will be able to remove the need for trusted third parties. Blockchain will remove the need for almost every third party. So with blockchain, we will be able to take all of these intermediary trusted third parties and kick them into the past. We will not need them. And to further illustrate this point, so how does blockchain achieve this version of reality where we don't need third parties? And what is blockchain? Healthcare providers, they store our records, our personal information on their computers, on their servers. Facebook, whenever you log onto Facebook, you send a message to your friend, your cousin, you like a photo, all of that record of information and transactions are stored on their computers, on their servers. Every time you go to the bank and you make a withdrawal or a deposit and you send money to a friend or you borrow money, all of that is recorded on your personal record and that is stored on their computer, on their servers. All blockchain wants to do is say, hey, we have a new way of recording information. So to illustrate this, how does blockchain facilitate this reality where we no longer need third parties? This is Chase Bank. Chase Bank, to illustrate this, that's Chase Bank in all its glory. Chase Bank has computers, servers in the buildings that they own, and on those computers and servers is our personal records on the computers that they own in their buildings. All blockchain wants to do is say, hey, instead of recording that personal information on your computer, on your server, that private server, it's saying, hey, let's distribute this record across a network of computers. So what is blockchain and how does it facilitate this version of reality? All blockchain is a way to record information. We just described how healthcare providers record our information on their computers, on their servers. We just described how Facebook records our information, our data on their servers and their computers. We just described how the bank records our information, record of transactions on their computers, on their servers. All blockchain wants to do is say, hey, we have a new way to record information where we do not need a centralized, trusted, third-party, private entity to facilitate this anymore. We have a new way of recording information. So instead of recording that private information on that private server, we're saying, hey, let's record this data across a network of computers, removing the need for the third party. And now, why is this approach of recording information better, superior than the old school approach that we're all kind of forced to use? Well, there's the benefit of decentralized control. When our data is stored on Chase Bank's centralized server, they have total control over it. They can choose to sell that data if they want. They can choose to change that data if they want. It's centralized in one place, so if it's hacked, every single record on that server is vulnerable. So we are decentralizing control. So instead of one person, one group of people who have an agenda, may have their own agenda, being a corporation, we're saying, hey, we can decentralize this control. So that's one benefit. Another benefit, enhanced security. Blockchain is more secure. It uses cryptographic techniques that make the blockchain more secure, less vulnerable, and we'll illustrate that in a little bit. It has increased transparency. When our information is recorded on Chase Bank's private computer and private security, it's not transparent. They can choose to show us what data they want. They own it. It's not transparent. But if we have that record of information spread out across a network of computers, every computer in the network has a copy of the list of records. Every computer in the network can see every transaction that ever happens. It's all an open book. And you may think, oh, well, transparency, I don't want people to see who's sending money to me and who I'm sending money to. You have a degree of anonymity. Because while it's transparent, all you see is that this wallet, AB123456, sent this wallet, CBDGA123, a transaction. So it's all an open book, but it's not tied to a personal identity. So it's transparent, but you have your anonymity. So increased transparency. Reduced cost. By removing the need for the trusted third party, we don't need to pay the fees involved. When we are forced to use the third party, they act as like a toll collector. If I want to send money to a friend in Australia, I have to go through my bank and say, hey, send this money to my friend's bank. And so in this case, we have double the third parties intermediating. And sometimes there's multiple banks along the way. And that's why it takes 3 days, 5 days for transactions. These middlemen have to communicate with each other. And each middleman wants a cut. By being in the middle, these intermediaries act like toll collectors. So by removing the need for the middlemen, the network of computer facilitates the same services, the same roles that we would use for the third party would provide. The computer network provides it all. And so we're able to reduce the cost. It's censorship resistance. Chase Bank can say, hey, today, you're no longer allowed to send money to anyone they want to say you can't send money to. If Chase Bank says, hey, you're not allowed to send money to anyone in Uruguay anymore, you're no longer allowed to send money. As a matter of fact, we froze your account. We're going to censor how you use our services. How many more ways is blockchain, this new way of recording information, superior than the previous way? Data sovereignty. Again, when our data is recorded on their private servers, we have no control over what happens with it. If, like I said, if they want to sell it, if they want to share it with a friend, if they experience a merger and acquisition and now their company is bought up, our data is just surrendered to the new entity. We have no control over our personal record, our personal information. So we have the advantage of data sovereignty. We have control if we want to surrender any personal information. It's in our control. And in my opinion, one of the most profound benefits among this long list of benefits of this new way of recording information is that blockchain is an immutable record. Does anyone in here happen to know what immutable means? I had to Google it too. So, I mean, at one point I had to Google it. Do you know?
Chiseled in stone.
Exactly. Exactly. It's chiseled in stone. Meaning, when data or information or a financial transaction is recorded on this record, it can never be changed. And to drive this point home, this is why it's so profound. If I created my account 10 years ago with Chase Bank and I opened my account with $10,000, it's possible, if there was a fraudulent attempt or a hacker or just an evil employee, it's possible to log in and go backwards in time and say, no, you actually started with $20. And that'll disrupt the foundation of every transaction that ever happened on my record. That's a capability and a feature of the current way that these third parties record information. But blockchain, once the record is recorded, once the information is recorded, the transaction is recorded, it's immutable, it's chiseled in stone. It is virtually impossible to change that data. Blockchain is an open network that's transparent, uncensorable, neutral, global, and knows no borders. It is the better way. But I want to preface the rest of this talk by saying, hey, it's going to be a while before this version of reality comes to fruition, where we no longer need third parties. 10 years, 20 years. Largely in part because big governments, China, Russia, the United States, big banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase Bank, big corporations, Facebook, Google, they like being in the middle. They enjoy the power that comes from being in the middle. They get to have access to your data, your information, your private records. And they can charge you to facilitate all the transactions that you want to do. If I want to engage with a friend on the internet, a lot of that is facilitated on Facebook servers. Whatever social media you want to put there. If I want to send money to a friend, that transaction has to go through the bank. If I move to another town and want to go to a new doctor, I have to trust that my old physician kept record, and then I have to rely on them to send the record to the new doctor. They are a necessary middleman. So I just wanted to preface this by saying, hey, it's going to take a while. You know, it takes a while for innovations to take place, but we also have this additional force of these middlemen. They're not exactly excited to accelerate this version of reality. They're not eager for this, but they know it's coming. They understand blockchain. They get this. This has already clicked in their mind a long time ago, but they cannot stop it. They cannot stop it. Blockchain is just the acceleration of the internet. It is the natural next evolution of the internet. Blockchain will be as big or bigger than the internet. And people you might hear people say, oh, it's a fad or this and that. It hasn't clicked. All this has not sunk in. They don't grasp that. And it's okay. But the reality is blockchain is a better way of recording information, and it's going to disrupt practically every industry in the world, including how the internet disrupted how we interact with friends. It didn't just disrupt every industry, groceries, banking. It disrupted even how friendships behave. I've got this really funny video clip. It's just a minute and a half long. It's very funny. It's from 1994. That's the Today Show. That's Katie Couric. Yep, exactly. So this is 30 years ago today. And I think this is going to be a great metaphor and illustration. Pay attention to the words they use, how they think about this thing called the internet, how they describe it. Pay attention to their present moment understanding of the internet.
6 pass, I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little
right.
mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At?
See, that's what I said. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
but I'd never heard it.
Around
I'd never heard it said. I'd always
across
seen the
around.
mark, but never heard
Yeah.
it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I
would
heard
be
something
around
big
or
fight
about?
up in the lunchroom the other
See,
week.
there it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean,
Well, Allison should know. What do you
is
say to that,
internet
Allison?
anyway?
Internet is that
Massive computer
right,
network.
the one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean? That's big. How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
Oh, Allison will be in the studio shortly.
What is
What
it?
does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's
So
like
they're
a
looking in the
computer
dictionary.
billboard.
It's not in it. It's a computer billboard, but it's
Right.
nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together. And
Right.
And others can access it.
and-
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It
Just
came
great.
in really handy during the quake. A lot of people, that's how they were communicating out to tell family and loved ones they were okay because all the phone lines were down.
I was telling Katie, and I've
But
been
you don't
talking.
need that. You don't need a phone line to operate internet.
No, no.
Isn't that hilarious? Oh, yeah, I love that. Gotta love that. So you heard them describe the internet as this giant computer network, and they were onto something there because the internet is a giant network of computers. But you heard her say something like, "Oh, the internet. It's like a computer billboard." What do you think she was talking about when she described this computer billboard? She's talking about a website. You heard him say, "Oh, what's the internet like? Is it like mail?" She's talking about email. So imagine present day, there's this buzzword going around. Internet, a network of computers, internet. You have that 22-year-old guy in the neighborhood talking about, oh, internet's going to change the world. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's a fad. Who gets that stuff? Whatever. What even is the internet? It did not click. It did not sink in. They had no conception of how the internet would interweave into every aspect of our lives. And Katie Couric is infamous for saying, oh, I'll never use the internet. I'll never use that thing. Do you think she uses the internet today? Uber, buying groceries, to book a hotel, online banking. Internet, a network of computers, disrupted every industry on the planet. It even disrupted how we interact with our friends, friendships. The internet was revolutionary. I think this is a really good, in my opinion, a great metaphor to kind of represent where we are at in the timeline of the blockchain. People just don't get it yet. It hasn't sunk in. Thought that was interesting. But yeah, today we're here to kind of touch on and wrap our head around what cryptocurrency is. Cryptocurrency is just the application, the using of blockchain, this new way of recording information, to remove the third party of a bank. So all these examples I painted the picture of how blockchain, this new way of recording information, could disrupt all these different industries and third parties. Cryptocurrency is just using blockchain to remove the third parties of the bank. And it just so happens to be the first function that blockchain has been applied to. And now it's being applied to every industry. All those long list of coins and tokens you may or may not know about, they're all different groups of people attempting to solve problems or solutions in different industries with blockchain. And cryptocurrency is just saying, hey, we're going to apply this idea of blockchain, a distributed record, to solve the removing the third party of the bank. That's all cryptocurrency is. Blockchain and cryptocurrency are not the same thing. Blockchain is a network of computers that records data, information, transactions. A good way to think about it is the internet, a network of computers, this technology of a network of computers makes email possible. Blockchain, this network of computers, makes cryptocurrency possible. Now, where do we get this infrastructure of these network of computers? Well, we've had decades and decades of building this infrastructure, and it's called the internet. This giant network of computers already exists. And so because of the internet, blockchain is possible. We just run this script, this code, this software, this way of record keeping across a network of computers, and we can apply that framework, these rails, to solving different solutions. And cryptocurrency, like I said, is just applying that solution to banking, to removing the third party of the bank. Profound, revolutionary. That's why this is so profound, gosh. Yeah, so the internet enabled unprecedented information sharing and connectivity, but it evolved to largely rely on centralized entities, banks, corporations, governments, to mediate transactions. So if you want to search the internet for information, we go through, majority of it happens through the Google search engine. We engage with the information on the internet through the Google search engine. Not only does that mean we have to give up so much information to them, they also can choose through their algorithm what's fed to you and what priority. The internet decentralized information, but it has become centralized because these big corporations created these big servers where most of the action on the internet happens in really just a few places. Most of the social interactions happens on social media. Most of the banking transactions happens on the bank portals. Most websites are stored on Amazon servers, so it's become centralized. But when I say when the internet decentralized information, so before the internet, does anyone here remember before the internet? Right on. Okay. Yeah, some of you guys do not remember before the internet. But before the internet, before information became decentralized, there were groups of people in research facilities in Australia who had knowledge and information that they were learning, and you had research teams in San Francisco, and you had a carpenter in Italy who had learning. All these people had knowledge and information, but with the internet, they're now able to share it with the world. So the internet decentralized information, which is amazing, and we've all benefited from that. Similarly, blockchain will decentralize trust. The internet decentralized information, blockchain will decentralize trust, and cryptocurrency will decentralize banking. So the internet evolved to decentralize information, and it evolved to share information. But it did not evolve with the rails for facilitating financial transactions. So if I want to buy a boat on eBay from a guy, that transaction does not actually happen on the internet. That transaction actually happens off the internet at the bank on their servers, reaching out to the other bank through their servers, and then once the transaction is concluded after 3, 5 days, 7 days even, then they record it on the internet as, hey, it went through. You could send the boat. But that transaction actually did not happen on the internet. It happened off the internet. Cryptocurrency is now the rails to facilitate monetary transactions on the internet. So now we've got the internet, which allows for information and data to be shared. Now, through this infrastructure of running code through this network of computers, we have the rails to facilitate the movement of monetary information, monetary energy. And in essence, so cryptocurrency allows a transaction to be facilitated on the internet without the need of a third party on their servers. The first ever use case of applying blockchain to facilitate monetary transactions is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the first way humans ever attempted to remove a third party of banks. So Bitcoin is the first example of a blockchain applied to attempting a solution. Bitcoin is the first example, but now we have thousands of examples of people trying to solve problems with blockchains. But Bitcoin is the first example. And that's probably the most common blockchain people think about when they think about blockchain, they think about Bitcoin. Honestly, we could conclude the talk, because the most important thing is to understand this conceptually. With blockchain, this new way of recording information will remove the need for a third party, and that's powerful. But we've got computer scientists in the room, really techie, geeky, nerdy people, which I admire, techie, nerdy, geeky people. I'm going to take a moment to just dive a little bit more into the technical stuff, so follow with me, don't be bored. So we're going to describe a little bit to illustrate how these properties of a blockchain are so advantageous. The open ledger, the distributed network. And so to illustrate this concept of an open ledger, let's say you have 4 people in a network. You have 4 people in a network that want to send money between each other. On the day of its inception, the genesis, the first day that this network comes into existence, A has $10. It is recorded on the first day that the network started. A has $10. A wants to send B $5. A sends to B $5. That transaction is recorded. B wants to send the D $3. B sends the D $3. It is recorded and linked to the last transaction. And say D wants to send C $1. This is to illustrate an open ledger. In this situation, everyone involved, A, B, C, and D, can see how much money is in the system, who sends money to who. It's not concealed on Chase Bank's server, hidden. It's open. It's an open ledger. Everyone can see with full transparency what's going on. And the transactions are linked together. D sends C $1. So this is to illustrate the value of an open ledger. We no longer have to trust because we can see. It's transparent. But blockchain wants to remove the need for a central ledger. We don't need to have a central ledger. So to illustrate this idea of a distributed ledger, a distributed record, instead of a centralized, everyone involved has a copy. So there's no need for a centralized entity to have the record. Everyone has a copy. So that's the power of distributed. We're now able to remove the need. So it's transparent. Everyone can see the transaction. And on top of that, we don't need a third party to one person or one entity to own the record. So that's to illustrate the value of having an open ledger and the value of having a distributed ledger. And to get one little more layer of techie into the technology of it all, and let me paint this picture. How many of you guys know how the internet works? Because this man is a computer scientist who probably knows 10 million times more than me. But the point I want to make is we trust that the internet is when we log on to the internet that we can get data, information. But we don't understand how one client, one computer, pulls information off of a server in Australia, and then that information is split up into packets through a TCP protocol and then fed back through computers all around the world till it gets to my client and then reassembled at the end. Most people do not know that, but they benefit from the internet. So honestly, that's why for most of us, unless you're a computer scientist, you really don't need to know the fine details. You need to understand the concept. But to illustrate a little bit more, and this is pertaining to Bitcoin. How can this network that no one owns run itself? There's got to be computers that have a reason to upkeep this record, and there is. If A sends $5, if A starts with 10, well, let's say A starts with $5, you guys. A is equal to $5, and A sends to B $5. And then B sends the D $1. B sends the D $1. If A attempts to send money to C, so A started with $5 and already sent the $5, A has $0. If A attempts to send $15 to C, everyone has a copy of what account has what money. They will know that this transaction is not possible. They will not validate it. They will not approve it because everyone has a copy. So that's to illustrate that point. If A starts with $10 and sends B $5, and B wants to send to C $3, that is a valid transaction. B has $5. It can afford to send C $3. So B is going to broadcast to the network of computers, hey, I want to send money to C. And there's these special computers in the network that we call miners, and we're talking about Bitcoin. There's these special computers in the network whose job is to upkeep and validate transactions. And so let's say A and D are miners. They have a copy of the ledger. D has a copy of the ledger. And B says, hey, I want to send these $3. A and D, who are miners, they're going to compete to validate this transaction. Because if they validate the transaction, they're rewarded financially, which is with Bitcoin. The miners, the computers themselves, are rewarded for upkeeping the network. So because we don't have a third party, a corporation going to upkeep the network because they make money off charging you to send money. But this network is autonomous because of this infrastructure. D and A are special computers in the network called miners, and they're going to compete to validate this transaction first because the first computer to validate it gets paid in Bitcoin. And so these miners have to do just two things. They have to validate that this is a validable transaction, which they have a copy of the network, so it's easy to approve that B can send C $3. Everyone knows that B has 5, so it can send 3. So B broadcast, A and D have two objectives. Validate that it's possible, which they can easily do because they have a copy that tells them B has the money. And they have to now compete. After a transaction is added to the network, it has a cryptographic key code. So that in order for a new block, and we won't get into blocks right now, but in order for a new block to be added to the ledger, not only do you have to say, hey, this is a validated transaction, these computers are going to compete to find the lock and key, the key that will allow it to connect to the ledger. And this is a cryptographic code that's numbers and letters, and it's random. So these computers are contributing processing power to find this random key. And the first computer to find that random key, now, so say D wins and it figures out the random key first, it now has the random key that can add it to its ledger. So D has found the key and is able to add it to its ledger. And now D can broadcast to the network and say, hey, this transaction is valid, and here's the key. All of you guys can add it to your ledger now. So that's how everything stays in sync. Because we have a distributed ledger, all of them have to stay in sync. And so once a miner figures out that lock and key code and adds it to its ledger, it distributes that lock and key code so that every other computer can add it to its ledger. So this operates autonomously, and that's how. And the exact sciences of it all, you don't really need to know, but obviously, unless you're a developer or you're just genuinely curious, what is the infrastructure of a block and all that. But that's to illustrate how Bitcoin works, because I know you guys are interested in what is Bitcoin. That's Bitcoin. In conclusion, we've learned that blockchain is not cryptocurrency. Blockchain is a way to record information across a network of computers. Cryptocurrency is applying that to financial transactions. Cryptocurrency is saying, hey, we're recording financial information. And blockchain is based on a few simple principles, which is the ledger is open where everyone can see it, and the ledger is distributed, so no one central entity owns it. And we learned a little bit about how miners validate it. So how does this network upkeep itself? Because the computers in the network are actually incentivized with financial return for contributing. So with this technology, there are no borders. Just like with the internet, there are no borders. Anyone with a computer can connect without permission. And this network of computers is not a product, it's not a corporation, it's not a private entity, and it doesn't matter what race you are, what country you're from, how old you are, what gender you are. If you have access to a computer, even a $20 Android, and you can download an app, you can have access to a global banking system. And that is powerful. To really drive that point home, there are more than 2 billion people on the planet who don't have access to banking. Do you think it is profitable for Chase Bank to attempt to service poor people in poor countries? Do you think it is profitable for them to seek out these poor people as clients? No, they don't have money. Why would I worry about onboarding them? If you are a person in Kenya, if I have a friend who traveled from Africa and he sends money. As a matter of fact, a BDC member, he has family in Africa that he sends money to. And in order to receive money, PayPal, Venmo, Revolut, TransferWise, all these means of sending money, you have to have a bank. You have no means of receiving money. And there are small, private, corrupt entities in these villages that will facilitate the transaction at like a 40% premium, that are preying on these people who are already broke. Now you can drop a $20 Android into a small village in Kenya, and these people have access to banking. They can receive money, send money, borrow money, lend money, all the services of a bank. That is remarkable. But it is possible that children born today maybe know a world where banks don't exist in the same way. It's possible that children born today may not know what paper money is. Just like you guys who don't remember before the internet, which, I'm almost right there with you. Before the internet, if you wanted to find information, you had to go to a library, look up a reference card to find a book somewhere in the building to get the information on the pages. And we don't remember that. So just like the internet, decentralized information, blockchain is decentralizing trust, and cryptocurrency is decentralizing banking. And I want to close by sharing this profound thought. The ability to achieve distributed consensus among a group of people who don't trust each other, and we're all in agreement and concordance with it, without any central party or authority. We're all a group of people, and we don't trust most people. There's a group of people in Greece, in Australia, they all feel the same way. They don't trust us. But we now have a means that we all can share a consensus with because we don't have to trust an intermediary, and it can connect all of us. And that is the power of blockchain and cryptocurrency.